The Sacrifice. Few movies end as dark as this one. The Wicker Man. Howie travels to the island to investigate the disappearance of a young girl named Rowan Morrison. According to rumors, she was kidnapped by a group of pagans who live in isolation in the region. As the investigation moves forward, Howie notices that something is very wrong with that place, but he still believes he's there to save the girl. Until the truth is revealed in the most brutal way. The whole story was nothing but a trap. He is the real target of the plan. The community needed a human sacrifice to ensure a plentiful harvest, and Howie was the chosen one. The chosen method is terrifying, placing him inside a gigantic wicker sculpture shaped like a man and setting it on fire. The contrast between the flames consuming the structure and the almost cheerful singing of the villagers is disturbing, creating one of the most striking and unsettling images in horror history. The Freezing. In the futuristic timeline of the Friday the 13th franchise, Jason Voorhees is finally captured and placed inside a cryogenic chamber to keep him from continuing his killing spree. Centuries later, in the year 2455, explorers find his frozen body and decide to take him aboard a spaceship. What they don't know is that they've just brought along the worst passenger possible. When Jason wakes up, he starts brutally killing the crew, but the most memorable death comes right at the beginning. He keeps her head submerged in liquid nitrogen until it freezes solid. Then Jason pulls her out and, with one quick move, smashes the skull to pieces against the metal counter. The smile in the fire. After days trapped in a bizarre festival surrounded by mysterious deaths, Danny is finally crowned May Queen. But the prize isn't just flowers and dancing, it's power. Power to decide who will be the final human sacrifice in the Harga cult ritual. Among the options is a villager who volunteered, and Christian, her boyfriend. The same Christian who spent the entire movie being cold, distant, and humiliating toward her, even though she had just gone through a traumatic situation. Without saying a word, Danny makes her choice. That's when the ritual is complete. Christian is placed inside a dead bear, sewn into the carcass, and taken to the wooden temple, along with other bodies to be burned. The heat rises, the flames consume everything, and Danny's expression changes, from shock and tears to a slow, almost serene smile. It's the most disturbing moment of the film, not because of the fire itself, but because we realize Danny is no longer a victim. She found a place, and maybe a new family. The Bed of Blood. Freddy Krueger is one of the most iconic villains in cinema. A killer who invades the one place where you should be safe, your dreams. And worse, he can only kill you when you're asleep. In the original A Nightmare on Elm Street, one of the most creative and disturbing deaths involves Glenn, played by young Johnny Depp. Everything seems calm and he's lying in bed, listening to music, trying to relax. But Freddy is lurking, waiting for the right moment to strike. Suddenly, Glenn is pulled down into his own mattress, as if something invisible grabbed him. We don't see Freddy, but we feel his presence, and that makes it even more unnerving. Blood gushes up to the ceiling, spilling across the walls, turning the scene into a visual nightmare. No scream, no body, just the certainty that Freddy claimed yet another victim into his world. This death became one of the most memorable images of the 80s horror, proving that sometimes what you don't see can be even scarier. Eaten by boars. In Hannibal, Gary Oldman plays Mason Verger, a man scarred physically and emotionally after becoming one of Hannibal Lecter's victims. Disfigured and driven by revenge, Mason comes up with a cruel plan to feed Lecter to a pack of wild boars. The scheme seemed foolproof until Lecter's cunning came into play. With words sharp as blades, he manipulates Cordell, Mason's personal doctor, who, tired of his boss's abuse and humiliation, decides to take revenge. The attack is quick and brutal. The animals swarm him, and the camera doesn't need to show much for the audience to feel the horror. The sound of flesh tearing and Mason's muffled screams complete the scene. Spider eggs. In the mist, the fear doesn't just come from what you see, but also from what's about to come out. After a mysterious fog engulfs the region, bringing with it indescribable creatures, a group of survivors is trapped inside a supermarket. But the need for medicine forces them to leave, and fate takes them to a nearby pharmacy. Inside, the scene is pure horror. Overturned shelves, thick webs covering everything, and in the corner, a man hanging, completely wrapped in sticky threads. The most grotesque moment happens. The man's chest and face start to twitch, and with a dry crack, dozens of mutant spiders crawl out of him. Through muffled screams, the man is still able to express that he was feeling everything. What a terrible way to die. Man, as someone who's scared of spiders, this scene makes me so anxious to watch. Death by leeches. Even though it was released straight to video, Puppet Master gathered a cult following and kickstarted a horror franchise. In the first movie, we meet Frank, a psychic who ends up facing one of the strangest and most disturbing deaths in cinema. His fellow psychic, Carissa, ties him up in a sensual way, making it all feel like a kinky game, or at least that's what he thinks. But Carissa is kicked by one of the puppets, and who takes over the game is Leech Woman, a puppet that lives up to her name in the worst way possible. She leans over Key and begins regurgitating live leeches one after another onto Frank's body. Unable to see anything, he thinks it's still Carissa being daring, but the illusion ends when it's already too late. The leeches start sucking his blood, slowly, agonizingly, and we've got to admit, the filmmaker's creativity here is just as bizarre as it is unforgettable. Death by Basketball. Among Wes Craven's films, Deadly Friend is one of the least known and definitely didn't reach the success of Scream or A Nightmare on Elm Street. Maybe that's because of absurd scenes like this one. The victim is Elvira Parker, played by the legendary Anne Ramsey. In the movie, she's the grumpy neighbor who holds a grudge against the protagonist and, of course, is about to pay the price for it. The tension begins with the old lady searching her house for an intruder, only to find a basketball lying around. Then she throws it. The ball hits Elvira's head with superhuman strength, and what should have been a simple impact turns into a grotesque explosion of blood. In the end, only a ridiculously bizarre movie could turn such an innocent object into a deadly weapon. And if you think that was already crazy, just wait for our next topic. Sleeping Bag Kill. The Friday the 13th franchise is known for its creative deaths, but sometimes simplicity is what makes a scene truly unforgettable. After brutally killing Dan, Judy's boyfriend, Jason Voorhees turns his attention to her. What few people know is that originally the scene had 6 brutal strikes, but to avoid the film getting an X rating, it was reduced to just 1. And ironically, that made the moment even more iconic. In fact, there's another similar Jason scene. In Freddy vs. Jason, he simply walks into a house, attacks the guy on the bed, and in the end, he just folds the bed in half. I'll admit, that scene really traumatized me when I was a kid. The Last Dance. Suspiria delivers one of the most brutal and uncomfortable deaths in modern horror, and it happens without a single visible drop of blood at first. After confronting Madame Blanc and the other dancers, Olga decides to leave the company, but when she tries to go, she ends up trapped in a spell. The door shuts by itself and she's left alone in the center of the room. Meanwhile, in another studio, Susie Bennion begins a new rehearsal with Madame Blanc, except every one of Susie's movements is magically transferred to Olga, not as a dance, but as physical punishment. With each spin, jump, or twist from Susie, Olga's body bends in impossible ways. Arms pop out of place, her jaw distorts, and her legs twist around themselves. The sound of bones cracking mixes with heavy breathing and cries of pain. Unable to scream, Olga is tossed around again and again until she has no strength left. This scene became a landmark in modern horror. Choreographed like a macabre dance, executed with impressive practical effects, and capable of making the audience uncomfortable from beginning to end. The Murder on the Stairs. In High Tension, Alex's father, Daniel, comes downstairs half asleep and opens the door to answer the call, but is met with a brutal blow to the head. Stumbling and barely conscious, Daniel hardly realizes when the intruder grabs his head and forces it between the staircase rails. The killer then scans the room as if choosing the perfect tool for the job. His eyes land on a heavy dresser. He drags it to the stairs and then, without hesitation, shoves it with all his strength against Daniel's skull. It's a quick scene, but the coldness and cruelty leave it burned into your mind. But if you think that was shocking, just wait until you see the next death. The Pool. In Final Destination 4, Hunt's death is a perfect example of how death can find you even in the most ordinary moments, like a dip in the pool. It all starts off seemingly harmless. A kid is playing with a water gun and accidentally sprays Hunt's phone. Annoyed, Hunt grabs the toy from the boy and throws it, not realizing that in the process, he accidentally activated the pool's drain system. Meanwhile, a stray golf ball knocks his lucky coin into the pool. Determined to get it back, he dives in, unaware that the pool is starting to drain. Then comes the most shocking moment. Chestburster. In the classic Alien, Ridley Scott gave us one of the most disturbing deaths in horror history. It all begins when Kane, one of the crew members, is attacked by a strange alien creature, the infamous facehugger. It latches onto his face, wraps its tail around his neck, and inserts some kind of tube straight down his throat. The crew tries to remove the parasite, but nothing works. Eventually, the facehugger just detaches, leaving Kane seemingly fine. But that's when the real threat begins. During a relaxed meal, Kane suddenly starts choking, gagging, and writhing in extreme pain. Then, in the most shocking moment, his chest grotesquely expands and a small, terrifying alien bursts out screaming, covered in blood, before quickly scurrying into the shadows of the ship. This sequence, besides being a milestone in horror, is also famous for shocking not just the audience, but even the actors themselves, who didn't know exactly how the scene would play out. Ridley Scott never told them there would be so much blood, just to capture genuine reactions. Veronica Cartwright's scream of terror is 100% real. Seriously, I jumped so hard the first time I saw this scene. Poor Kane. The killer cable In Ghost Ship, the idea of a ghost ship is taken literally, and right in the opening scene, we get one of the movie's most memorable moments. Amid the music and laughter, a mysterious saboteur tampers with a thin steel cable stretched across the deck, and in a split second, the wire snaps free. The result? The cable whips through the ballroom like an invisible blade, slicing everyone in its path as if they were butter. The only immediate survivor is a little girl, too short to be struck by the height of the wire. But the trauma of what she witnesses goes far beyond any physical wound. To this day, horror fans still cite this opening as one of the most brutal ever made. The Deadly Glass. Back in the 70s, mainstream horror was still relatively light compared to today's standards, at least when it came to graphic violence. And maybe that's exactly why Keith Jennings' death was so shocking. While trying to recover sacred daggers at a construction site, Keith is caught off guard by a bizarre accident. A truck loses control and the impact is immediate and fatal. Today, the effect might look a little over the top, but at the time it was the perfect mix of timing, unexpected violence, and the sudden death of an important character, something that left audiences stunned. The scene is so well crafted that looking back, it almost feels like a prototype for what we'd later see in the Final Destination franchise. And let's be honest, even when you know exactly what's coming, it's impossible not to squirm when that giant sheet of glass starts sliding down. The Ant Feast. Okay, this one doesn't happen in a horror movie, but I had to include it on this list. In Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, Colonel Antonin Dovchenko is introduced as one of the most brutal henchmen in the Soviet army. The guy is an absolute machine of destruction and spends most of the film chasing Indy without giving him a break. During an insane chase through the Amazon jungle, Dovchenko and Jones end up in a hand-to-hand fight right next to a giant ant mound. And these aren't ordinary ants, they're Siafu, army ants known for devouring anything in their path. The situation escalates quickly when Dovchenko gets hit and falls directly onto the ants. Within seconds, thousands of them start crawling up his body. He tries to get up, shake them off, scream, but it's useless. The most disturbing part is watching the ants crawl into his mouth while he screams. Without a doubt, this is one of the most painful deaths in movies. The Laser. In Resident Evil, a group of elite soldiers invades the underground of the Umbrella Corporation to investigate the T-virus leak. What they didn't expect was that the real enemy wouldn't just be the infected, but also the artificial intelligence that controls the facility, the Hive. During the mission, the team gets trapped in a sealed hallway, and suddenly, the terror begins. Laser beams are projected from one end to the other, turning the corridor into a deadly high-tech trap. At first, the soldiers manage to dodge them, but each time the laser appears, it gets harder, creating impossible patterns. The most memorable moment comes when one of the members is caught head-on by the final beam. The Deadly Drive-Thru. The Final Destination franchise is famous for turning small accidents into deadly traps, showing that death always finds a way to collect its debt. In the third movie, it's no different. Frankie Cheeks survives the initial roller coaster disaster along with Wendy and the others. He believes that since he escaped, he's finally safe. But in Final Destination, that sense of security never lasts long. The scene happens when Wendy and Kevin are stuck in their car at a drive-thru, unable to get out. The panic builds as a runaway truck heads straight toward them. And Frankie, who's in the car in front, doesn't move and just stays there, but he wouldn't have done that if he knew what was about to happen. The Head. In Dead Snow, what was supposed to be a simple ski weekend for a group of friends turns into a real nightmare. The trip to the Norwegian mountains seemed perfect until they discovered the area hid a dark secret, a cursed Nazi treasure guarded by an army of zombies that should never have been awakened. In a desperate attempt to stay safe, the group hides in an isolated cabin, but the undead soon start forcing their way inside, surrounding every exit. And the zombies aren't just immortal, they also have brutal, inhuman strength. Among the group is Erland, the nerd, a horror movie fan, always cracking jokes about cliches, but no movie knowledge prepares him for real horror. As he tries to block one of the windows, he's suddenly attacked in a brutal way. Sliced in half. 13 Ghosts is a movie that mixes a haunted house, vengeful spirits, and lots of creative gore. The plot follows a family that inherits a mysterious mansion, only to find out it's actually a prison for 12 violent ghosts. Among the characters is Benjamin Moss, the lawyer handling the inheritance. Greedy and arrogant, he doesn't care about the family or the risks, only about the fortune hidden inside the house. But the mansion is filled with deadly traps. The glass walls move on their own, turning the place into a deadly maze. While exploring, he ends up stuck in a corridor, and without warning, a glass door slams shut at high speed. The impact is so fast and precise that his body is sliced in half. The camera lingers on the disturbing detail, the front half sliding slowly down the glass, while the back half stays standing for a few seconds. Eye Splinter. Director Lucio Fulci became known as the godfather of gore in Italy, and Zombie 2 is probably the best example of that reputation. The movie follows a group traveling to a tropical island in search of answers about the rise of the undead. There they find pure nightmare, corpses rising from the ground, excessive blood, and uncensored violence. One of the victims is Paola Menard, the wife of the doctor trying to contain the epidemic. Alone at home during a zombie attack, she's cornered with no chance to escape. In a slow and agonizing sequence, we see her face getting closer and closer to a sharp splinter, until her eye is pierced. The director doesn't cut away before the impact, choosing instead to show everything raw and explicit. The Sledgehammer. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre not only defined the slasher genre, but also delivered one of the most shocking scenes in horror cinema. The movie follows a group of young people who, while visiting an isolated Texas farmhouse, stumble into the territory of a cannibal family led by the monstrous Leatherface. Among them is Kirk, who separates from the group and enters what looks like an abandoned house in search of gas. But what seems like just an old rural home quickly becomes a nightmare. Without warning, Leatherface strikes Kirk with a sledgehammer. The young man's body collapses, convulsing on the ground, and before the audience can even react, he's dragged into the room. The Merman. The Cabin in the Woods breaks down every horror cliché by revealing that behind the terrors is a secret facility, manipulating young people in bloody rituals to appease ancient entities. In the film's finale, chaos is unleashed. Every monster, creature, and abomination locked inside escapes, turning the facility into a massacre. Among the victims is Steve Hadley, one of the facility's technicians. During the attack, he keeps fighting, firing at the swarm of monsters, until an explosion throws him to the ground. Exhausted, he thinks he might make it out alive, but fate had other plans. From the fog, the very creature he'd been waiting to see the entire movie finally appears, the Merman. With no time to react, Hadley faces the monster and delivers his last words. The Defibrillator. In The Thing, John Carpenter created one of the greatest sci-fi horror classics ever, where an alien creature capable of imitating any living being infiltrates a base in Antarctica. The tension builds because you never know who's still human and who's already been taken over. At the peak of the paranoia, Norris, one of the crew members, collapses, apparently from cardiac arrest. Amid the chaos, the base's doctor, Dr. Copper, rushes to save him, but the moment he presses the defibrillator, Norris's body reveals its true form. The scene doesn't just shock because of the violence, but because it drives home the film's central theme. The creature could be anyone, just waiting for the right moment to strike. The Yoga Girl. In a Violent Nature stood out for bringing a different perspective to the slasher genre. Most of the story is shown through the eyes of the killer himself, Johnny, as he wanders the forest hunting for victims. Among the group of young people who invade his territory is Aurora, nicknamed by fans as Yoga Girl. She separates from the others to meditate alone, but that moment of peace quickly turns into one of the most brutal deaths in the film. In seconds, Johnny drives a hook through her stomach and lodges it into her head. Then, with no remorse, he starts pulling on the chain attached to the hook, twisting her body. The camera doesn't look away. We see every disturbing detail up close. The Mirror Curse. For years, Kaylee and Tim lived haunted by the Lasser glass mirror, which they blamed for the death of their parents. In the present day, the two return to their old house to prove that the object really is cursed and to destroy it once and for all. Obsessed, Kaylee sets up traps and even rigs a guillotine to a timer to smash the mirror if something goes wrong. But as the night goes on, it gets harder and harder to tell reality from illusion. Exhausted, Kaylee believes she's hugging her mother, like a late reconciliation. But the scene is just another trick of the mirror. In reality, she's approaching the mechanism set up to destroy the Lasser glass. That's when Tim, convinced he's saving his sister, releases the rope. The blade slices through Kaylee's neck in an instant, killing her on the spot. The Gymnast. In Final Destination 5, we get one of the most creative deaths in the entire franchise. Candace, a young gymnast, is training when a series of malfunctions start turning the gym into a lethal trap. A loose bar, a screw in the wrong place, unstable equipment, everything combines into the suffocating atmosphere typical of the saga. During her routine, Candace launches into a sequence of flips, but one of her teammates steps on a nail and stumbles into a bucket of chalk powder. That distraction throws Candace off balance and she loses control, and then... The Jealous Father. City of the Living Dead is another Lucio Fulci movie that delivers one of the most visceral zombie moments ever made. The story follows a series of apocalyptic events after a priest commits suicide in a cemetery, literally opening the gates of hell. Among all the brutal scenes, one of the most disturbing doesn't even directly involve a zombie, but instead fanaticism and human violence. Bob, a lonely young man already mistrusted by the community, is caught by Mr. Ross near his daughter. Consumed by irrational fury, Ross believes the boy is a threat, and his paranoia only grows in the apocalyptic climate that's already overtaking the city. Without hesitation, he shoves the boy into a drill which bores straight through his skull and brain. It's a raw, uncomfortable scene. Ironically, here the biggest monster isn't the zombie, but the so-called protective father. Microwave Head. The remake of The Last House on the Left brought back the brutality of Wes Craven's original, but added even more graphic and creative deaths. One of them became the film's signature, the infamous Microwave Head. After a night of terror, the criminals who destroyed young Marie's life end up facing her parents' revenge. John Collingwood, her father, goes way beyond any limit when he decides to take out Krug, the gang's leader. With cold precision, he restrains Krug and positions his head inside a microwave oven. Without any rush, John turns it on and watches. The familiar, almost ordinary sound of the microwave contrasts with the horror of what's happening. Slowly, Krug's skull starts to bubble, his eyes twist, and finally, his head explodes. The Possessed Dog. The film When Evil Lurks delivers raw, unpredictable horror where a small rural community faces the presence of the possessed, people taken over by a demonic entity that spreads like an infection. Among the most brutal moments is the family dog scene, which catches the audience completely off guard. What makes it so disturbing isn't just the violence, but how it breaks the sense of safety. A dog, usually seen as the family protector, becomes an agent of evil, showing that in this world, no one is safe. The Bus. The movie's story begins in the 1960s. Twin brothers Hal and Bill, still children, find what looks like a harmless toy in their family's attic, a wind-up monkey that bangs metal cymbals. But they soon realize the toy is anything but harmless. Every time the monkey claps its cymbals, someone dies in a strange and brutal way. The brothers learn that they can't just ignore the toy. It's like it's part of the family, something that can't be thrown away without consequences. In the present day, we see the weight of all those accumulated deaths and how the monkey keeps interfering with their lives. Then comes one of the film's strongest transitions. One of the characters tries to finally get rid of the toy, putting it in a car to take it away. But in the post-credit scene, we see just how unpredictable this monkey really is. The kids were just celebrating when they got hit. Nobody saw that death coming. The Final Smile. In Smile, Dr. Rose Cotter faces a case that seems unexplainable. Laura, a young patient, claims she's being stalked by an invisible entity that takes the form of people with terrifying, twisted smiles. What first looks like a simple psychological breakdown soon turns into something much darker. Laura had just witnessed her professor's grotesque suicide. Since then, she said the entity was following her everywhere. With nowhere else to turn, she went to the hospital for help, but her meeting with Rose only became the start of a new cycle of horror. During the session, Laura panics and begs Rose to believe her. But before any help can come, the evil force takes over. Laura freezes, lifts a broken piece of glass, and with a horrifying grin across her face, slashes her own throat right in front of Rose. The Deadly Chair. In Gremlins, the Christmas spirit of a small American town gets turned upside down when an innocent holiday gift, the little creature Gizmo, spawns an army of mischievous and chaotic monsters. What begins as a Christmas comedy quickly turns into a festival of destruction. Among the townspeople is the dreaded Mrs. Deagle, an arrogant woman who treats her neighbors, and even animals, with total disdain. During the Gremlins invasion, they decide to have some fun at her expense, sabotaging her motorized chairlift, the only way she could get up and down the stairs at home. When she sits down, thinking it's just another normal ride, the chair shoots up the stairs at insane speed, turning them into a roller coaster. At the end of the ride, the chair blasts out the window, launching Mrs. Deagle straight to her death. Most brutal kills of Jason Voorhees. The Trash Can. In Friday the 13th Part 8, Jason is resurrected and ends up boarding a ship with students heading to New York. What should have been a celebratory trip turns into a massacre at sea, which continues when the killer finally reaches the city streets. Charles, the strict and controlling teacher, tries to escape, but Jason relentlessly chases him down until cornering him in a narrow alley. With brutality, Jason lifts him up and throws him inside a trash can full of toxic waste and then does something disgusting and cruel. Skull crushing. Back in Friday the 13th Part 6, we have Tommy Jarvis, still haunted by the events of the past, trying to make sure Jason never comes back to life again. But his attempt to destroy the body goes wrong. Lightning strikes the coffin and brings Jason back as an immortal zombie, stronger than ever. Now in Forest Green, he starts a new wave of brutal murders. The sheriff and his team try to stop him, but quickly realize that regular weapons have no effect at all. Officer Pappas unloads his revolver on Jason without causing any damage. In a quick and merciless move, Jason grabs the cop's head with his hands and starts squeezing with superhuman strength. Pappas is killed, and his body drops lifeless right there. But when it seems like Jason has already reached the peak of his brutality, one of the most grotesque deaths in the entire franchise shows up: the girlfriend. In Jason Goes to Hell, after finally being ambushed and blown to pieces by the FBI, he seems defeated, but his supernatural essence lives on, possessing bodies to continue his killing spree. Still, the brutal style of his murders remains the same, and one of the most shocking happens in a simple camping tent. Deborah and her boyfriend are about to have an intimate moment when the darkness of the forest reveals their worst nightmare: Jason. He then pulls the pole upward, literally splitting the girl in half inside the tent, leaving her boyfriend in shock at the grotesque scene. Twisted head. Also in Friday the 13th Part 6, we get the bizarre death of Sissy. The Crystal Lake Camp, renamed Forest Green, once again becomes the stage for a bloodbath. The young camp counselor is in her room when she hears a noise, but before she can react, Jason storms in and grabs her brutally. He twists Sissy's head at an impossible angle, snapping her neck with a sharp crack. Her body falls lifeless as Jason continues his hunt across the camp. Trapped. In the Friday the 13th reboot, Jason Voorhees returns even more brutal, intelligent, and relentless. The group of young campers at Crystal Lake becomes easy prey for a killer who doesn't hesitate to make every death cruel and painful. Amanda is captured, and instead of a quick death, Jason chooses something much more sadistic. He stuffs her into a sleeping bag, completely immobilized, and hangs her over a campfire. With no chance to escape, Amanda is burned alive. The fire slowly consumes the sleeping bag, turning her agony into a terrifying spectacle. This scene was definitely a reference to one of the most remembered deaths of the franchise, one we'll show a bit later. While some suffer a slow and painful death, others don't even have time to fight for their lives. The dance floor. Another sinister death happens in Friday the 13th Part 8. Eva Watanabe's. Jason had boarded the graduation cruise to New York, causing a massacre on board. While trying to get away from the chaos, Eva finds herself alone in the empty room, not realizing Jason is already lurking. With no chance to escape, Eva gets cornered, and within seconds, Jason grabs her by the neck. He squeezes her neck until her body collapses lifeless on the dance floor. Look behind you. Also in the reboot, Jason Voorhees is mercilessly hunting anyone who tries to escape his territory. Among the survivors is Trent, one of the movie's most arrogant characters. Selfish and cowardly, he desperately tries to run away alone, but his fate is already sealed. Jason shows up behind him, uses his machete, and finally impales him on a truck. Yeah, man, I'd be running for my life too. The Cleaver. In Friday the 13th, the final chapter, Jason Voorhees escapes the morgue and returns to Crystal Lake, where he terrorizes a new group of teens and the Jarvis family, who would end up playing a crucial role in his fate. It's in this setting that one of the most memorable deaths of the film happens. Jimmy, played by Crispin Glover, is distracted when Jason surprises him from behind. Without giving him time to react, Jason finishes him off with a cleaver to the face, instantly dropping Jimmy. The Sauna Rock. In Friday the 13th Part 8, we get another bloody death. Jason is still aboard the ship full of students heading to New York, and among the passengers is a young boxer who, after a fight, decides to relax in the ship's sauna. While he tries to rest, Jason silently enters the sauna. Instead of using his favorite weapon, he improvises with something nearby. Cold-blooded, Jason grabs the overheated rock and takes the guy by surprise. The victim had no time to react and died almost instantly. And if Jason has already shown creativity improvising weapons, the next scene shows how he gained the symbol that would mark his image forever: the hockey mask. Poor Shelley. In Friday the 13th Part 3, Jason continues his terror spree, this time in Higgins Haven. Among the group of teens is Shelley, the comic relief of the story. Always pulling pranks, he tries to fit in with his bad jokes, but his last prank goes terribly wrong. Yeah, looks like this time it wasn't a prank, and he came face to face with Jason, which led to his end. After killing him, Jason takes Shelley's hockey mask, an accessory that would become the villain's ultimate symbol, and turn him into a horror icon. Crazy Ralph. In Friday the 13th Part 2, Jason Voorhees is starting his own wave of terror. Among the returning characters is Crazy Ralph, the eccentric doom prophet who had already warned about the lake's curse in the first movie. This time, his habit of spying on and warning the teens becomes his death sentence. Out of nowhere, Jason appears behind him. Using barbed wire, the killer wraps it around the old man's neck and only stops when he no longer resists. Trailer ride. In Friday the 13th Part 6, Jason continues his brutal killing spree around Forest Green, eliminating anyone who crosses his path. Inside the trailer, young Nikki is walking around calmly when she suddenly gets grabbed. Unfortunately, Court has no idea what's happening since he's blasting music on his headphones. With no way out, Jason slams Nikki's face against the metal bathroom wall. The scene is quick but impactful. Sheriff Garris. Still in Friday the 13th Part 6, we get one of the characters who tries to face Jason head-on. Sheriff Garris, determined to protect the town at any cost. When Jason finally invades the camp, Garris jumps into action, trying to fight the killer directly. The fight is short but intense. In one of the movie's most shocking moments, Jason easily overpowers him. He grabs Garris and bends him backward with such force that the sheriff literally breaks in half. Just the sound of it makes you cringe. Paintball. In that same movie, we have a group of executives taking part in a paintball game out in the woods. Everything seemed fine until the fun was suddenly interrupted by an unexpected encounter with Jason Voorhees. In one of the franchise's most memorable moments, Jason grabs one of the players and smashes his head against a tree trunk. The impact is so strong that the blood leaves a bizarre mark in the shape of a smiley face on the trunk. Popped eye. In Friday the 13th Part 3, we also have the bizarre death of Rick, Chris's boyfriend. When he comes face to face with Jason, there's no chance to react. The killer grabs him by the head with both hands and, in one of the saga's most brutal moments, starts slowly crushing his skull. The pressure is so intense that one of Rick's eyes literally pops out of his face, creating one of the franchise's most iconic scenes, the uppercut. Again in Friday the 13th Part 8, we have Julius, a young boxer who decides to face the killer head-on. He gathers every ounce of courage and goes for it, throwing dozens of punches at Jason's body and face, but nothing happens. Jason doesn't move back, doesn't feel pain, he just stands there in silence. Exhausted, Julius throws one last punch and with no strength left, dares Jason to give it his best shot. That's when the final blow lands. With a single devastating uppercut, Jason knocks Julius's head clean off in one strike. Upside down kill. Besides all the gruesome deaths we've seen, there's this one in Friday the 13th Part 3, where Andy is just walking around on his hands inside the cabin, basically doing a handstand instead of walking normally, and he's doing it all carefree. But the fun doesn't last long. Jason suddenly shows up and with no time to react, swings his machete. Andy is literally cut in half while still upside down. This scene became memorable for the contrast, a goofy moment that instantly turns into one of the bloodiest deaths of the film. It was actually so graphic that it got cut from the original release for being too much. Goodbye, Alice. Back in Friday the 13th Part 2, Jason makes sure to start his killing spree by eliminating someone very special, Alice, the lone survivor of the original Crystal Lake Massacre. She was trying to move on with her life, but the trauma was still alive in her mind. And unfortunately, Jason was right behind her. Out of nowhere, Jason breaks into her home, and the silence of the night is shattered by a sudden, cruel attack. He grabs Alice and drives an ice pick straight into her head. With that, Jason wipes out the only survivor from the first massacre. Speared in bed. In the same movie, Jason shows once again how he can turn moments of vulnerability into pure horror. A couple is in bed, caught up in a moment of intimacy. What they don't know is that Jason is already there, hiding underneath, waiting for the right moment to strike. Suddenly, he drives a massive spear upward, piercing through the mattress and impaling both victims at once. The folding bed. In Freddy vs. Jason, two horror icons finally face off, and of course bizarre deaths had to be part of it. Freddy Krueger brings Jason back from the dead to spread fear in Springwood, but the plan quickly gets out of control when Jason starts killing non-stop, making it clear he wouldn't be easy to manipulate. Even before the showdown begins, Jason proves he's still unbeatable in the art of creative killing. This time, the victim is Trey, a young guy who doesn't even have time to react. Jason suddenly appears and stabs him repeatedly, turning the room into a bloodbath. But Jason doesn't stop there. He grabs the bed Trey is still on and, with supernatural strength, folds it in half. A quick death, but so brutal that whenever I think about this movie, this is the very first scene that comes to mind. The sleeping bag In Friday the 13th Part 7, Jason faces something new for the first time in the franchise. A young girl with telekinetic powers, Tina Shepard. But before that supernatural showdown, he makes it clear his brutality hasn't changed at all. One of the most famous and brutal deaths of the saga happens when Jason drags a camper out of her tent. She's still trapped inside her sleeping bag, completely defenseless. Jason doesn't need fancy weapons or elaborate plans. He lifts the heavy bag with insane strength, and, well, you know what happens next. One single swing is all it takes to end her life. To this day, this death is remembered as one of the franchise's fan favorites, and it was even recreated in Friday the 13th, the game. The Machete. In Friday the 13th Part 2, one of the most brutal and most remembered deaths is Mark's, a young man in a wheelchair. He thought he was safe, just enjoying a quiet moment. But with Jason, peace never lasts long. Out of nowhere, Jason appears behind him and drives his machete straight into Mark's face. As shocking as that already is, what happens next is even more disturbing. The impact sends Mark, still in his wheelchair, tumbling down a long flight of stairs. The camera follows his body as it bounces step by step, backward, while the chair rattles out of control. Liquid nitrogen. In Jason X, the franchise takes us somewhere completely different, outer space. Jason's body, kept in cryogenic stasis, ends up aboard a futuristic spaceship, but the second he's thawed out, the killing starts again. One of the victims is Adrienne, a student trying to examine Jason's body in a high-tech lab. She thinks she's safe, surrounded by advanced equipment, but Jason doesn't need anything other than raw brutality. Without a word, he grabs her and plunges her face into a tank of liquid nitrogen. The result is instant and shocking. Adrienne's face freezes solid in seconds, but Jason doesn't stop there. He pulls her frozen head out of the tank and smashes it against the counter. This death is still remembered today as one of the most brutal in the entire franchise. Most brutal kills of Freddy Krueger. The Coach. In A Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy finds a different way to spread terror by trying to return to the real world through the body of teenager Jesse. Schneider, known for his abusive and intimidating behavior, decides to punish Jesse and takes him for a late-night training session, but that strict routine quickly turns into a nightmare. While Schneider is in his office, the gym equipment starts moving on its own. Frightened, he tries to run, but a jump rope comes to life and wraps tightly around him. Trapped, Schneider is dragged into the shower where steam starts filling the room, making it suffocating and impossible to see. And then, Freddy attacks. Invisible, he's only revealed through the slashes, blades cutting Schneider in every direction, blood splattering across the shower walls. With no chance to fight back, Schneider is brutally killed. But that's just the beginning, because in the 2010 remake, Freddy showed an even darker and crueler side. Death in the Cell. Years later, in the 2010 remake, The Nightmare returns, darker than ever, with a furnace-like atmosphere and pure desperation. Jesse Braun suddenly finds himself in Freddy's favorite place, the boiler room. The air is thick, filled with smoke, metallic creaks, and the constant hiss of steam escaping from pipes. Jesse walks around trying to understand where he is until he hears Freddy's claws scraping against metal. Freddy steps out of the shadows, dragging his blades slowly, clearly enjoying the fear. Jesse tries to run, but every hallway brings him back to the same spot, like he's trapped in an endless maze. No tricks, no witty one-liners. Freddy goes straight for the kill. With one brutal move, he drives his clawed glove through Jesse's chest. The chalkboard. Even near the end, Freddy keeps finding new ways to torture his victims, turning even sound into a deadly weapon. Carlos, who has a hearing impairment, ends up falling right into Freddy's trap. The killer appears in front of him and, in a sadistic move, gives him back his hearing aid, but not the way it was before.
Yes!
Now, every tiny noise is amplified to an unbearable level. Carlos starts hearing even a pin drop like a thunderclap. Then Freddy takes it to the extreme. He appears with a chalkboard, grinning wickedly, and slowly drags his blades across it. For Carlos, the sound becomes torture. He screams, writhes, and the pressure in his head grows with every second. Sheila's fate. Some nightmares start out calm, until Freddy decides to mess with the very air you breathe. In the fourth movie, Alice and her friends become Freddy's new targets. Among them is Sheila, a shy, studious girl with asthma. Exhausted, Sheila falls asleep over her desk, not realizing she's slipping into a nightmare. Suddenly, the atmosphere changes. The pencil slips from her hand, and the pages of her test start to melt before her eyes. Freddy approaches and, in a grotesque act, kisses her. But it's no ordinary kiss. He literally sucks the life out of her.
Want to suck the face?
No.
In the real world, her classmates watch in horror as Sheila suffers a sudden respiratory failure with no explanation. Inside the nightmare, Freddy steps back, satisfied, leaving behind only her lifeless, shriveled body, like an empty shell. But if you thought that was cruel, wait for our next topic, The Last Supper. Freddy has always had an appetite for suffering, and in the fifth film, he turns an elegant dinner into one of the franchise's most grotesque scenes. Freddy finds a new way to hunt his victims, through the dreams of Alice's unborn baby. One of them is Greta, who dreams of becoming a model, but in this nightmare, things quickly take a dark turn. The guests are frozen in place, and suddenly, the waiter is replaced by none other than Freddy himself. Greta is tied to her chair, unable to move. Freddy pries open her mouth and starts force-feeding her disgusting chunks of a doll's insides. She tries to resist, but he keeps shoving the food down her throat until her body grotesquely swells up, suffocating her. In the real world, Greta collapses during dinner, leaving everyone around her in shock. It's one of Freddy's most symbolic and disturbing kills, a twisted reflection of Greta's fear of losing control over her own image. The pizza of the damned. And if that dinner wasn't enough, Freddy once decided to try something different, a pizza made from the souls of his victims. In A Nightmare on Elm Street 4, The Dream Master, Freddy turns even dinner time into a nightmare. During a bizarre dream sequence, he sits at a table ready to devour his favorite meal. But it's not just any pizza. Each slice is topped with tiny human faces, the trapped souls of his victims baked into the dough.
My favorite.
Freddy bites into it with delight, while the little faces scream and groan in agony with every chew. With a wicked grin, he lifts a slice and mocks his victims.
Rick, you little meatball. I love so.
The scene, besides being disgustingly memorable, is one of the most symbolic in the entire franchise. Paper cuts. Also in the fifth movie, we meet Mark, the comic book fan of the group, who ends up with one of the most creative and cruel deaths in the series. Inside the nightmare, he turns into his superhero alter ego, believing he can finally fight back against Freddy. For a moment, it even seems like he might win, but Freddy flips the script and turns him into a simple paper cutout.
Told ya, comic books was bad for ya.
With no way to defend himself, Mark is sliced into shreds. Game over. In the sixth film, Freddy shows he can invade even video games. Here, he turns a simple game into an 8-bit torture session. Spencer is relaxing, watching TV, having no idea what's about to happen. Suddenly, the screen comes to life and grotesque arms reach out from the TV. Spencer is pulled inside, now trapped in a psychedelic video game world. On the other side, Freddy shows up holding a special controller, the iconic Power Glove modified with his blades.
Now I'm playing with power.
Inside the game, Spencer is controlled like a digital puppet, jumping, taking hits, and being thrown around. Meanwhile, in the real world, his body is violently tossed across the room, smashing into walls, furniture, and even the ceiling, as if controlled by an invisible hand. The game ends when Freddy pushes him toward a hole in the digital floor, and at the same moment, in the real world, Spencer crashes through the ground, falling to his death. Dan speeds to his end. Also in The Dream Child, Freddy takes his cruelty to the road, turning a motorcycle into a death machine. Dan is riding his bike, trying to escape after a call with Alice, but in the middle of the highway, something feels wrong. His body starts fusing with the motorcycle. Dan screams as the vehicle becomes part of him, a grotesque hybrid of flesh and metal. Freddy appears, laughing as he controls the scene like the mastermind behind this twisted fusion.
This boy feels the need for speed.
The nightmare peaks when Dan loses control and crashes head-on into a truck. In the real world, his body is found mangled, the result of one of Freddy's most brutal methods yet, tearing through his flesh in one of the most graphic transformations in the entire series. Debbie gets crushed. Back in the fourth movie, Freddy turns a girl's fear into a literal nightmare. Debbie, who absolutely hates bugs, ends up becoming exactly what she fears the most. Let's just say, if you're afraid of cockroaches, this scene might be a little disturbing. Debbie is at the gym, lifting weights like it's just another normal day. Suddenly, a not-so-friendly training partner shows up. Her arms snap grotesquely, and from the fractures, cockroach legs start to emerge. The transformation continues until Debbie turns into a giant roach trapped inside a roach motel, one of those sticky traps for insects. Then Freddy, with a sadistic grin, grabs the box and crushes it mercilessly, leaving nothing but slime behind. Freddy versus the Wizard Master. In the third film, Dream Warriors, a few kids decide to fight back, but facing the King of Nightmares means playing on his turf. Will, who uses a wheelchair in the real world, finally gets his chance to fight like never before. In the dream, he transforms into a real Wizard Master, capable of casting spells and using powers against Freddy. For a moment, it looks like he might actually win. Freddy backs off, surprised, and Will thinks he has the upper hand. But as always, the Master of Nightmares flips the script, and in an instant, Freddy grabs the boy.
Sorry, kid. I don't believe in fairy tales.
Before Will can react, Freddy impales him with his claws, driving them straight through his body. The Addict. Also in Dream Warriors, a girl tries to fight Freddy with bravery, but he decides to attack her where it hurts the most, her past. Taryn, a former drug addict, becomes a fierce warrior inside the dream, ready to take Freddy down. She charges at him full of courage, but Freddy, always cruel, goes straight for her weakness.
Let's get high.
He grabs her and injects her violently, causing a fatal overdose right there inside the nightmare. The Big Break. Also in the third movie, the Dream of Fame turns into a nightmare when Freddy turns a TV into a murder weapon and drops one of the most iconic lines in the entire franchise. Here we meet Jennifer, a girl who dreamed of becoming a TV star, but ended up with one of the most unforgettable deaths in the series. She's alone watching TV in a dark room when her eyes start to get heavy. Suddenly, the screen begins to warp, and without warning, robotic arms burst out of the TV and grab her by the shoulders, lifting her off the ground. Freddy's grotesque head emerges from the top of the TV, sarcastic and grinning. That's when he delivers his classic line. With one brutal motion, he slams her head into the screen, crushing it inside the TV. The Burning Death. In the fourth film, terror reaches even the beach. Freddy shows up under the sun and turns paradise into flames. What starts as a calm dream quickly becomes a nightmare. Out of nowhere, Freddy appears on the beach and begins chasing her. Kristen tries to run, but the sand beneath her feet starts shifting, and suddenly she's sucked into quicksand. When she opens her eyes again, she's already in Freddy's favorite place, the dark, boiling boiler room. The suffocating heat and the roar of the fire make it clear there's no escape. He overpowers her easily and, without mercy, grabs Kristen and throws her straight into the blazing furnace.
Now no one sleeps.
Joey's Dream. Also in The Dream Master, Freddy uses desire as bait and turns a teenager's fantasy into a deadly trap. This time it's Joey, one of the survivors from Dream Warriors. He dreams of a beautiful model seducing him, but it's all just another one of Freddy's tricks. Suddenly the mattress starts to move, and from deep inside it, Freddy bursts out, tearing through the plastic and dragging Joey under the water. Unable to fight back, Joey drowns in his own nightmare. In the real world, his mother finds him dead, submerged in his own bed. Philip's strings. Back again in the third movie, we get one of the most disturbing moments of the whole franchise. Freddy turns a boy's tendons into puppet strings and makes him walk to his death. Philip, a patient at a psychiatric hospital, loves making puppets, until Freddy turns that passion into pure horror. Suddenly, Freddy appears as a grotesque marionette and, in full size, slices open Philip's arms and legs, pulling his tendons out. Turned into a human puppet, Philip is forced to walk through the hospital halls as Freddy controls him like a twisted puppeteer. At the end of the nightmare, Freddy gives the final command, and Philip is thrown off the tower. The Tribute. In New Nightmare, the franchise reinvents itself with a metatone, bringing Freddy back as a demonic entity that escapes into the real world. At one point, this entity attacks right in the middle of a hospital.
Can't stop it, you're scaring me.
Just like in the very first iconic kill of the series, Julie is lifted into the air and violently slammed into the walls, dragged around the room. It's a clear homage to the death of Tina in the original movie, which we'll get to soon. But spoiler, this one's even crueler because Julie is murdered by invisible forces right in front of little Dylan's terrified eyes. A legend dies. Again in Dream Warriors, Nancy Thompson returns, older and wiser, but learns that even heroes have an expiration date in hell. Now an adult, she joins a group of teens to face once again the monster that haunted her years ago. After so many battles, Nancy knows Freddy's tricks, but he still manages to surprise her. During the final showdown, when everyone believes the nightmare is over, Freddy appears in an unexpected form, that of her late father.
I love you so much.
In a moment of vulnerability, Nancy approaches him, thinking it's a final goodbye, but it's all a trap. Suddenly, Freddy reveals himself and stabs her mercilessly with his claws.
Die.
Even fatally wounded, Nancy refuses to give up. With her last strength, she grabs Freddy's own glove and impales him with it, pinning him down. That final act of courage gives the others a chance to defeat the monster. Nancy, the first survivor to ever face him, sacrifices herself to save a new generation. It was the death of a true legend, proving that with Freddy, no one is ever truly safe. And if even Nancy couldn't make it, just imagine what happened to Glenn in the first film. Glenn's bed. In the very first movie, the 1984 original, Johnny Depp plays Glenn, the boy who thought he could take a quick nap, until his bed literally swallowed him in a geyser of blood. Despite Nancy's warnings, Glenn dozes off, and that's his fatal mistake. Out of nowhere, Freddy's glove bursts out of the mattress and drags him underneath. The room goes silent for a few seconds. Then the horror begins. A massive fountain of blood erupts from the bed, splattering across the ceiling and flooding the entire room. It's one of the most iconic deaths in horror history, not just for its brutality, but for its unforgettable visual impact. And fun fact, it was Johnny Depp's first movie role ever. The end. Tina Gray. And that's where it all began. Tina Gray was Freddy's very first victim, and her death set the brutal tone for the entire franchise. While she dreams, Freddy attacks her savagely. In the real world, though, all Rod can see is an invisible force slashing her skin, open with deep cuts. She's thrown violently across the walls, dragged onto the ceiling, and tossed around like a rag doll as blood sprays everywhere. Finally, Tina falls back onto the bed, lifeless, leaving behind only silence and a horrifying trail of blood. All deaths in The Monkey. Deadly Harpoon. The story begins in 1999 when P.D. Shelbourne walks into a pawn shop looking nervous and anxious. He's carrying a strange toy, a monkey that plays the drums, and he wants to get rid of it as quickly as possible. He barely notices, but he's covered in blood, something he only realizes when the shop owner points it out. Oddly, P.D. doesn't seem to care, explaining that the blood isn't his. He just wants to get rid of the toy because his kids don't like it. The shop owner, always strict about his rules, tells him that he doesn't take returns on children's toys, especially when they are broken. P.D. tries to explain that the monkey is cursed, but he's interrupted by something impossible to ignore. The toy starts playing its creepy beat, hitting the drumsticks on its own. That's when the tragedy happens. A rat, drawn by the noise, bites through a wire that's holding a harpoon, which fires without warning. The harpoon shoots straight through the shop owner, rips out his intestines, and leaves him dying in agony. The scene is fast, brutal, and shocking. Petey, realizing how serious the situation is, runs to grab a flamethrower, hoping to destroy the monkey once and for all. But the first lesson becomes clear. The toy isn't just a toy. It has a will of its own. It's unpredictable and deadly, and every move it makes can trigger disaster. The restaurant. When Hal and Bill, who are twin brothers, were still just two curious boys rummaging through their father's old stuff, they came across something that at first glance looked like just another toy forgotten by time. But we already know what that monkey is capable of. The thing had a strange, glassy stare and a body covered in dust, but the kids found it funny. They laughed, pressed the button, and kept the toy as if it were some kind of funny relic, without realizing the nightmare they were about to unleash. The next day, their babysitter Annie took the brothers out for dinner, trying to give them a calm, happy day. But that damned monkey went along. In the middle of the restaurant, while Annie was watching the chef flirt playfully, the monkey started again. That metallic, rhythmic drumming echoed through the place. Within seconds, the atmosphere changed completely. Inside the kitchen, the chef, distracted, started cutting meat with too much force. He turned to look at Annie, and in one quick motion, the blade sliced across his neck. A clean hit, a sound that froze the air, and suddenly, she turns her head, and we still don't know what just happened. Then the blood starts dripping down her neck, and Annie's head falls onto the grill. Hal and Bill were terrified. They couldn't understand how something like that could have happened, but one thought started forming in their minds: the monkey. In the days that followed, Annie's funeral was one of the saddest moments of the boys' lives. No one could really explain what had happened, and they didn't have the courage to tell anyone what they had actually seen. From that moment on, Hal and Bill started to realize that there was something very wrong with that toy. It wasn't just some old toy. It was a kind of death omen. Mother's blood? The relationship between Hal and Bill starts to become complicated. Hal was always shy and sensitive, while Bill was more aggressive and provoking, often bullying his own brother. One day, still as kids, Hal, trying to protect himself from his brother's teasing, winds up the toy and wishes that the monkey would kill Bill.
I wish Bill was dead.
At that exact moment, Bill arrives home and finds their mother, Lois, cooking in the kitchen. The monkey, silent until now, starts to play its dark, eerie rhythm. Within seconds, Lois starts bleeding all over her body, with no apparent explanation, until she collapses on the floor and dies. At their mother's funeral, the doctor tells the boys that Lois suffered a boomerang aneurysm, but Hal knows the truth. It was the monkey that killed her. He feels powerless, and the trauma of that experience marks both brothers for life. The event not only leaves Hal and Bill motherless, but also proves that the toy can't be controlled or predicted. unexpected. It acts whenever it wants and chooses its victims at random. Even after the funeral, the boys start to realize that the monkey is more than just an ordinary toy. It's a malevolent presence that will keep haunting them. Hal becomes deeply scarred by what happened and starts having nightmares about his mother. Dreams that start off calm and familiar but always end the same way, with his mother dying again, blood streaming from her eyes. It's clear that the memory has traumatized him deeply. Tragic camping. After their mother's death, Hal and Bill are sent to live with their Uncle Chip and Aunt Ida. They try to bring some normality back into the boys' lives, but the drumming monkey keeps following them, silent and dangerous. Hal tries to destroy the toy but finds it filled with blood inside, and later it reappears completely intact. During a backyard camping night, the presence of the toy starts causing tension. Bill, not believing that the monkey could really cause deaths or tragedies, winds it up despite Hal begging him not to. Moments later, their uncle is killed in a horrific way, trampled by several horses while still inside his sleeping bag. The boys throw the toy into a well, believing they finally contained it. The return of the toy. Years go by and Aunt Ida now lives alone in the old family house, but her peace is only an illusion. One night, she senses that someone is inside the house and carefully walks down to the basement holding a gun. At first, she finds nothing, but the tension builds. The silence is heavy and every small sound feels amplified. Ida goes back upstairs, relieved she didn't see anything, but the danger is still there. As she walks up the stairs, one of the steps breaks and she falls onto several cardboard boxes filled with old stuff. Among those things are some fishing hooks that get tangled in her face. With her face full of hooks, she goes to the bathroom and removes them one by one. Then she applies alcohol to clean the wounds, thinking everything will be fine, but it won't. She suddenly smells gas leaking and goes to check. When she leans in, the stove nearby turns on by itself. Flames quickly engulf her head, setting her on fire in a horrifying way. Still trying to escape, Ida runs through the hallway in panic, but crashes into a sharp wooden sign outside the house. The impact is fatal. The pool. 25 years after the traumatic events of his youth, Hal lives isolated and consumed by paranoia. His distance extends to his family, as including his son Petey, who is about to be legally adopted by his mother's new family, cutting Hal out of the boy's life completely. Now, Hal carries the weight of the past alone, without emotional support or family connection. Everything changes when he hears the news of Aunt Ida's death. Soon after, his brother Bill calls him for the first time in 5 years. He shares his suspicion that the monkey, the old object of so many tragedies, is causing trouble again. Bill insists that Hal go to Ida's old house to retrieve the cursed toy, reigniting fears that Hal thought he had left behind. The tension rises when Hal witnesses something unexplainable at the hotel where he's staying. A woman dies after the swimming pool becomes electrified when an air conditioner falls from the ceiling, causing a short circuit. As she tries to step into the water, she's electrocuted and torn apart. This event confirms to Hal that the curse connected to the monkey is still active. Between fear, old trauma, and a sense of urgency, Hal realizes he must confront his past, face the threat he thought had ended decades ago. Treacherous shotgun. After Aunt Ida's death, the family house goes through the selling process, and several people visit the place to pick out objects and belongings. Taking care of everything is Barbara, a real estate agent responsible for organizing the removal of items and showing the property to Hal. She walks through the corridors of the house, checking the furniture and cabinets. There, she explains to him that the neighbors also died in very strange ways after Ida's death. Even with the deaths, neither Barbara nor anyone else around noticed that all those accidental deaths could somehow be connected. Barbara approaches an old wardrobe. She tries to open it to check what's inside. Suddenly, without warning, a shotgun that was stored on the top shelf of the wardrobe falls down. The impact causes the weapon to fire immediately. The bullet hits Barbara fatally, exploding and killing her instantly on the spot. The scene is quick and violent. Hal, who is nearby, can't react in time. The Wasps. Hal and Petey discover that Bill not only lives in town, but also keeps the monkey under his control. Bill suspected that their mother's death was caused by Hal, who used the monkey to try to kill him, and now he wants revenge. To help him, Bill hired Ricky, a local man obsessed with the toy, to recover it. Curiously, the monkey keeps killing random people, leaving Hal desperate and afraid for his son's safety. Hal begs Bill to stop the deadly sequence, but Bill imposes cruel conditions. He promises to stop only if Petey takes on the task of winding the key forever. If Hal refuses, Bill threatens to keep winding the key until Hal dies, not caring how many victims will appear along the way. Bill's power and psychological control increase Hal's feeling of helplessness in the face of the situation. The situation intensifies when Ricky, completely obsessed with the monkey, forces Petey at gunpoint to retrieve the toy directly from Bill's house. Following the instructions, Petey winds the key. Fate intervenes violently. A swarm of wasps attacks and kills Ricky. The wasps immediately fly out, attacking him aggressively. He doesn't even have time to protect himself. It all happens too fast. He can't get rid of the insects that sting his face, entering his eyes, mouth, and other sensitive parts of his head. The attack is fast and deadly. Each movement only attracts more insects, and within minutes, he is completely overrun by the the swarm. Ricky's face is totally destroyed by the multiple wasp stings. His death is instantaneous due to the number of wounds and the severity of the attack. The incident leaves Hal and Petey shocked, watching from afar, while Bill remains focused on his own goals with the monkey, aerial chaos. At the most critical point of the movie, Bill insists on using the drumming monkey to try to kill Hal, who, together with Petey, tries to stop him, but he is determined. The toy starts playing more and more. The intense and rhythmic sound triggers an unpredictable chain reaction while everyone is focused on the conflict. The monkey's beat is about to cause another tragedy, this time an even bigger one. A plane flying overhead begins to have problems. The pilot loses control and the aircraft falls in a chaotic spiral over the city. The plane crashes almost right on top of Hal, Petey, and Bill. Some of the bodies inside are thrown out, making the scene even more terrifying. The city turns into a complete scene of destruction, with streets covered in smoke, burning vehicles, and desperate people unable to understand the chaos that has taken over the city. Final ball. After all the destruction caused by the monkey, Hal and Bill finally have a moment of reconciliation. They talk briefly, trying to understand each other and overcome the traumas of the past. For a few seconds, it seems that the tension between them has eased, and Hal feels that he can finally connect with his brother after years of distance and tragedy. But the monkey, always unpredictable, still isn't done. While the brothers are close, the toy hits its drumsticks again, and another death is about to happen. But this time, it's Karma. A bowling ball positioned strategically, almost like a trap, is released precisely, rolling quickly toward Bill. Bill doesn't have time to react. The ball hits his head with devastating force. He falls immediately, unable to defend himself or dodge. The force of the impact is instant and fatal, ending the life of Hal's older brother. The tragedy happens in seconds, with no chance of intervention, showing that the monkey remains deadly even when everyone believes the worst is over. Petey and Hal watch in shock, witnessing Bill's sudden and absurd death, which happens right after the moment of reconciliation. The monkey remains still after its last act, as if it had completed its final goal. The scene marks the end of the direct sequence of deaths caused by the toy, leaving Hal and Petey as survivors amid the destruction and chaos caused throughout the entire movie. Shocking body discoveries in horror movies. The Friends. In Midsommar, after the disturbing mating ritual, Christian wanders, staggering and disoriented around the village. The drugs still keep him dizzy, making everything seem distorted and slow. He then ends up finding Josh's leg, a friend who was killed and had parts of his body buried in a garden bed. But something even more shocking was coming. He opens the door of a chicken coop, trying to understand where he is, and it's at that moment that the true horror reveals itself. Inside the suffocating space, at first glance, it looks like just a regular storage room. But then Christian lifts his eyes and sees Simon, or what's left of him. His body is hanging and opened in a macabre ritual known as the Blood Eagle. A chicken eats parts of his body. Christian freezes. He approaches to confirm that it is indeed his friend. Before he can react, a villager appears behind him, blowing a powdered substance into his face. Christian then ends up passing out, and at the end of the movie, he suffers a similar fate. The Daughter. In The Ring, one of the most memorable scenes happens when Rachel visits Katie Embry's mother, trying to understand what led to the girl's death. The atmosphere is heavy, as the mother is visibly shaken, searching for answers no one can give. She asks if her daughter had confided anything to Rachel. Any clue? Anything. But Rachel denies it, saying she never mentioned anything. Then the mother, with a trembling voice, reveals what she saw. She was the one who found her daughter's body. The tension hits its peak when the movie suddenly cuts to the scene in a flashback. The closet being opened, and Katie's body inside, pale, distorted, and frozen in an expression of pure terror. The Box. At the end of 7, detectives David Mills and Somerset follow John Doe to a desolate field, the location chosen for the final act of his gruesome plan. Everything changes when a van appears on the horizon, bringing a simple cardboard box. Somerset opens the box and, when looking inside, becomes terrified. Mills, confused, demands answers while John Doe calmly starts speaking, explaining that he felt envy toward the peaceful and loving life Mills had with his wife Tracy. He confesses that he killed and decapitated the woman, sending her head as the final gift. The camera never shows what is inside the box. The horror comes from the reactions of the characters. Somerset tries to hold Mills back, who begins to scream desperately. John Doe then reveals the last step of his plan. He represents envy, and Mills will represent wrath. Overwhelmed by pain and fury, Mills loses control and shoots Doe multiple times, completing the cycle of the 7 deadly sins, which was John Doe's final goal. Yeah, this is one of the best movie endings I've ever seen in my life. The Pole. The death scene of Charlie in Hereditary is traumatic. It all begins when Peter, the older brother, drives desperately at night to take his sister to a hospital. Charlie had been at a party with her brother and ended up eating a piece of cake containing nuts, something she was allergic to. Charlie is desperate and running out of air with a severe reaction, and she sticks her head out the window trying to breathe. Right after, the car swerves to avoid an animal on the road, and her head is ripped off when it hits a pole. Peter remains motionless, unable to look back. He drives home, parks the car in the garage, and goes up to his bedroom, lying on the bed in a state of absolute shock. The camera remains silent, showing only his tense face while the headless body of his sister remains in the car. The next morning, we hear the devastating sound of Annie, the girl's mother, discovering the scene. She finds Charlie's body and lets out a scream. The movie does not show the discovery directly, only the mother's reaction, which makes everything even more distressing and frightening. The head in the fish tank. Amy, a young college student, goes through days of pure terror. Ever since her fiancé left for his bachelor party, she feels that something is following her, a dark presence that seems to accompany her every step. Little by little, people close to her begin to die in strange and violent ways. First, the dressmaker who was making her wedding dress, then her best friend and her friend's secret lover. Amy feels the circle closing in, but still tries to convince herself that it's all just coincidence. That illusion ends when she returns home after taking her sister to a party. The environment is silent, almost too calm. She enters the living room and something makes her stop. In front of her, inside the house's fish tank, is her friend's head, separated from the body and floating among the fish. Amy takes a step back, very scared, and right after, the killer appears behind her. It's the moment when she understands there is no more coincidence. Death is really after her, and no one around her is safe. Before we see how this head ended up in a toilet, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave your like on this video. That helps us a lot. The head in the toilet. In Curtains, 6 actresses think they are auditioning for a dream role, but the test becomes a trap. Trapped in a secluded mansion, they realize too late that someone is using the audition as an excuse to kill them one by one. The tension increases when Christy, one of the actresses, goes ice skating, and there she is attacked and has her head cut off by the killer. Brooke Parsons enters the bathroom of the mansion to paint her nails. Soon, something appears behind the curtains. It seems someone is there. She hears something strange and approaches the toilet, curious and apprehensive. Suddenly, she sees Christy's head. She screams, backs away, and runs out, desperate to tell director Jonathan Stryker what she saw. When Brooke and Stryker return to the bathroom, the horror intensifies in a different way. The head is gone. Stryker, not believing her, questions the story, increasing Brooke's sense of vulnerability and fear. The barrel. The horror in Megan is Missing is sickening. Megan Stewart, who had disappeared after meeting the mysterious Josh online, is revealed as the victim of a brutal crime. Desperate, Amy, who is her best friend, decides to search for answers on her own, but ends up falling into the same trap. Josh keeps her imprisoned, humiliated, and completely at his mercy. After days of psychological terror, he says he will release her, but there is one condition. She must get into the barrel to hide. Innocent and confused, Amy obeys. When she opens the lid, Megan's body is inside and decomposing. Amy screams, tries to run, but is overpowered by Josh, who forces her into the barrel along with her dead friend. Soon after, he digs a shallow grave and buries the barrel in the woods, while Amy screams and begs not to die. The Cursed Basement. Weapons is a horror movie that follows the mysterious disappearance of 17 children from the same classroom during the night. The story mainly follows teacher Justine Gandhi and Alex, the only student who didn't disappear, while the city falls into paranoia and accusations. At the climax, the true extent of the mystery is revealed. The missing children were in Alex's basement, trapped in a trance by the witch Gladys, his aunt. The children are immobilized, almost like zombies, while Alex is forced to feed them one by one with a spoon under the cold and controlling eyes of Gladys. When Archer and Justine enter Alex's house to save the children, everything quickly falls apart. Paul and James, who were friends but were under the spell, attack Justine, and she only survives by taking Paul's gun and shooting both of them. When Archer goes down to the basement looking for his son, he falls right into the trap. Gladys hits him with her spell and instantly turns him into an involuntary attacker. Out of control of his own body, Archer advances toward Justine, but it's Alex who changes the outcome. Running from his own bewitched parents, he uses a strand of Gladys's wig to break the spell. The result is brutal. The children rise from the basement like a small, vengeful army, hunt Gladys through the neighborhood, and tear her apart without mercy. In the end, the children return home and most regain consciousness, but not all. Some remain trapped under the witch's control. The Grandmother. When Evil Lurks is a horror movie that mixes supernatural elements and possession, where we follow Pedro and his brother trying to deal with the demonic contamination that begins to spread through the region after a possessed man escapes. In the middle of this chaos, Pedro does everything to protect his family, but doesn't realize that evil has already arrived at his house. and the grandmother scene begins with Yair, Pedro's autistic son, being left alone with her. Soon it's suggested that something possesses him because he shows unusual behaviors, almost as if the child momentarily were not autistic. The tension rises, the camera focuses on small details, showing unsettling glances and subtle movements that indicate the evil is manifesting through him. Later, Pedro returns and tries to feed Jair some ice cream, but suddenly, the boy chokes and starts spitting out clumps of hair soaked in blood. First one handful, then another, and another. Then something metallic falls to the floor. It was the grandmother's jewelry. It's in that moment that everything connects like a punch to the stomach. The grandmother didn't disappear. She was devoured. The movie does not directly show the act of violence, but the horror is graphically confirmed, revealing that Jair, under the influence of the evil entity, ate his own grandmother. Hidden truth. In the movie The Visit, the tension built throughout Becca and her brother's stay in the house of their supposed grandparents explodes in the shocking discovery of the basement. The scene is shown from Becca's point of view as she carries a camera to document everything. Suspicious of the increasingly bizarre behavior of the couple claiming to be her grandparents, Becca decides to investigate the basement. Before finding the freezer, Becca notices work uniforms from a psychiatric hospital scattered on the floor, worn by the real grandparents, and a hammer covered in blood, indicating that something terrible happened. When she opens the freezer, the camera briefly reveals the decomposing bodies of the real John and Marabella. The shock is immediate. She lets out a muffled scream and talks to the camera in an attempt to gather evidence. The deception is confirmed. The couple posing as the grandparents are actually escaped psychiatric patients who murdered the real ones and took their places. Becca is then found and confronted by the man pretending to be her grandfather, raising even more fear in the scene. The brother. In the movie The Invisible Man, the narrative leads us to an unexpected and disturbing revelation. Cecilia, who managed to escape an abusive relationship with Adrian, begins to notice signs that he still follows her, even after the supposed death of her ex. The sense of paranoia and fear is constant, with objects moving on their own and subtle traps suggesting the presence of someone invisible. The climax of this tension occurs at a friend's house, when Cecilia finally manages to overpower and shoot the man wearing the invisibility suit. The audience expects that upon removing the helmet, Adrian will be revealed, confirming that she was right all along. However, what we see is the face of Tom, Adrian's brother and accomplice, causing an immediate shock. This moment confirms that there are multiple invisibility suits and that the danger is not over. Cecilia is still at risk. The body on the floor. This movie here subverts expectations a little, since the supposedly revealed body was not dead. Throughout the movie Saw, Adam and Dr. Gordon believe that the corpse lying in the middle of the bathroom is just another victim as they try to survive Jigsaw's traps, but that wasn't exactly the case. At the climax of the story, Adam attacks Zepp, who enters the bathroom and kills him with a toilet lid. Then, Dr. Gordon, severely injured after cutting off his own foot to free himself from the chain, manages to crawl out in search of help, leaving Adam alone. While searching Zepp's body, Adam finds a new tape and learns that Zepp was not Jigsaw, but rather a victim forced to participate in the game to protect his own family. The true shock happens when the body that had been motionless the entire film moves. John Kramer, the real Jigsaw, is revealed, watching every step of the game he orchestrated. A terminal cancer patient, he had planned everything meticulously, including placing the key to Adam's chain in the bathtub drain, where it disappeared early in the film. Adam, desperate, tries to react but is electrocuted when attempting to use Zepp's gun. Jigsaw closes the door, locking Adam inside, sealing his fate, and pronouncing the iconic final line.
Game over.
The scene ends with Adam's desperate screams echoing through the bathroom as the credits begin and Saw's theme plays. Never survived. Carnival of Souls revolves around Mary, the only survivor of a terrible car accident that killed her friends. Traumatized, she tries to resume her life, but begins to be haunted by visions of a pale, mysterious man known only as the Man. Over time, Mary's behavior becomes increasingly strange. She enters trances, loses her sense of reality, and at times notices that people around her can't even see or hear her. It's as if she exists in some kind of limbo, trapped between two worlds. In the climax of the film, Mary enters an abandoned pavilion and sees ghosts dancing, including a distorted version of herself next to the Man. Frightened, Mary runs to a deserted beach, but is reached by them. The next day, when the police go looking for her, her footprints are still there. Soon after, the car from the opening accident is finally taken out of the lake, revealing a devastating detail. Mary's body is inside, next to the friends she believed she had left behind. The revelation shows that Mary never survived the accident. She was dead the entire time, wandering as a spirit who refused to accept her own end. The Mother. In Psycho by Alfred Hitchcock, for much of the film, the audience believes that the mysterious Mrs. Bates, mother of Norman, is responsible for the murders at the Bates Motel, including that famous bathroom scene that left many people traumatized for years. Everything indicates that she is a living, reclusive, furious woman who controls her son in a strict and oppressive way. But the truth is far darker when Lila Crane decides to investigate the Bates' basement. Driven by curiosity and fear, Lila flees from Norman, hides, and soon after slowly walks down the stairs until she reaches the room. She approaches cautiously, calling out for Mrs. Bates. No answer. Then Lila touches the figure's shoulder and the chair spins. What she sees is a mummified corpse with dry skin stretched over the skull, empty eyes, and a frozen expression in a macabre smile. The revelation is instant and devastating. Norman's mother has been dead for years. Lila screams in horror, and in that same moment, Norman appears at the basement door dressed in his mother's clothes, wig, and knife in hand, completely consumed by madness. But before he commits another murder, Sam Loomis appears and restrains him. It's the moment when the deception collapses. Norma Bates never committed any of these crimes. Her son Norman is both the killer and the mother, a man fractured by guilt and insanity. Genius escape. In The Silence of the Lambs, Hannibal Lecter has an impressive escape, and it all begins with a simple mistake. Dr. Chilton leaves a ballpoint pen in Lecter's cell. This small error becomes the key to the killer's freedom. Later, while being held in custody in Memphis, Lecter uses part of the pen to unlock his handcuffs. During the shift change, two officers, Lieutenant Boyle and Sergeant Pembry, enter the cell to check the prisoner. Lecter attacks quickly and coldly. He bites Pembry's face, takes the baton, and beats Boyle to death. Right after, he hangs Boyle's body on the cell bars, arms spread wide, creating a grotesque image that looks almost religious. But the real stroke of genius comes next. Hannibal removes Officer Pembry's face and uses it as a disguise, covering himself with the uniform and pretending to be one of the victims. When the rescue team arrives, they believe they are taking a wounded officer. In the chaos, the injured man is put into an ambulance, and only later do they notice the mistake. The police then see blood on top of the elevator and discover that the real body wearing Lecter's clothes was Officer Pembry himself. Next, the scene shifts to inside the ambulance, where the horror continues. Hannibal sits up and reveals he is wearing the policeman's face as a mask. Mortal Mirror. In the movie Oculus, siblings Kaylee and Tim return to the home marked by the terror of their childhood, dominated by the haunted mirror that killed their parents. They believe they have found a way to destroy the object. A simple mechanism, a lever that releases a heavy weight onto the glass, smashing it once and for all. Everything seems under control and the tension rises as they approach the decisive moment. While Tim positions himself alone in front of the mirror, activating the trigger, the force of the weight descends exactly as planned. But the mirror has its own tricks. Kaylee, still trapped by the illusions, stares into the glass and sees the figure of their dead mother reflected, arms open, calling to her. The weight then drops with brutal precision and hits her. Tim, horrified, realizes he has just hit his own sister. The impact dislocates her neck and partially impales her. Kaylee agonizes for a few seconds before dying. Tim has just caused the death of his sister, just like years earlier he had caused his father's death. He is dragged out of the house by the police, completely devastated, while he sees the ghost of his sister along with their parents.